After his win over Kamaru Usman last night at UFC 294, Khamzat Chimaev has opened as a minus 300 favorite over middleweight champion Sean Strickland. Before we talk about the odds, because that's what the point of today's video is, this fight may not even happen because we found out that Chimaev had broke his hand in the first round against Kamaru Usman. And you got to imagine the UFC starting to plan their schedule for 2024. How serious is this injury? Is he even going to get to fight Sean Strickland? I've said this before. I think Dricus du Plessis should be getting the next title shot. I don't know why the UFC is holding it against Dricus that he pulled out of that fight with Israel Adesanya when Charles Oliveira got a cut and he didn't get to fight Islam Makhachev, and he's apparently going to be next, according to Dana White last night at the UFC 294 presser. But that's a note for another day. It should be Dricus if Chimaev's not ready to go. But let's assume, for argument's sake here, that Khamzat Chimaev is going to be getting this fight next. There's no way he should be minus 300 against Sean Strickland. Let's talk about his performance in a second here, but Chimakar following up and saying, since these lines have opened, the money is coming quickly for the champ. The current lines are Chimaev minus 190, Strickland plus 165. Glad to see some people have some sanity here. You guys saw my reaction video last night. I was not that impressed with Khamzat Chimaev's win over Kamaru Usman last night. Look, that first round, I'll give him full marks. I was very nervous. I think like a lot of people being like, man, he is going to beat Kamaru Usman in the first round. And by the way, the reason I'm nervous is because on my live stream, I told a bunch of Chimaev fans that there was no way that Chimaev was going to beat Usman in the first round, and he nearly did. So I will give Chimaev credit for that. First round Chimaev is a dangerous Chimaev. That is a Chimaev that I think could potentially beat a lot of middleweights in that division because he's just so good when he opens the gate. But the problem is, after that, there's a lot of questions. I mean, this is another key fight for him, the Gilbert Burns fight being the first one, where he's definitely slowed down. And I've seen so many comments today, and I want to address this too, because it does tie into all this, that because Khamzat Chimaev broke his hand, that's why he slowed down later in the fight. That is one of the worst excuses I've ever heard. His hand has nothing to do with his lungs and his cardio. This just comes off as a really petty excuse from Chimaev fans, because let's be honest here, a lot of the Chimaev fans out there, a lot of them watching this video, you guys said he was going to steamroll Usman. And while it certainly looked that way for part of that first round, that didn't end up happening. So I think we got to slow the brakes down a little bit. We now have two fights with Chimaev where he was not able to take out his opponent in the first round. And when that doesn't happen, the fight looks totally different and it looks very close. Full marks to Kamaru Usman. He came in on short notice, 10 days, took a fight against Chimaev, survived the first round, and actually made this interesting. I think there's, certainly an argument for Usman winning one of those rounds. I know one of the judges felt that way too. It was close, but Chimaev got it done, and I don't have an issue with the scorecard. I think the rightful winner was there, but it was way too close for comfort. And if Usman had two more rounds, does he win that fight? I think there's an argument for that. If Usman gets a full camp to fight Khamzat Chimaev, does he beat him? I think there's an argument for that too. I am just so surprised that they opened the line here so big, because Sean Strickland's not exactly an easy guy to finish. Everyone seems to be obsessed and point to that Alex Pereira fight, but I am convinced that Alex Pereira, the former middleweight champion, knocks out 90% of the fighters in the middleweight division in the first round. That's how good he is. He just is that much of a devastating knockout artist. There was a lot of people who said Abus Magomedov was going to knock out Sean Strickland in the first round, and guess what? He didn't. To me, Abus and Chimaev are kind of similar, and they're very fast starters here. Strickland's not an easy guy to take out, so if you're taking away one of the biggest paths to victory for Khamzat Chimaev, which is him finishing in the first round, then there's no reason he should even be a favorite in this fight. I think Sean Strickland wins that fight right now if we're basing things off last night's performance. I know Chimaev broke his hand, but Sean Strickland, he's a well-rounded fighter. And these odds also suggest to me in a way that they're kind of taking Sean Strickland's win over Israel Adesanya as a bit of a fluke. I don't feel that way. I think Strickland's been good for a while. I think he was criminally underrated going into that fight with Adesanya. And I'm not of the belief that Adesanya had a quote-unquote off night. Was Adesanya at his best? No. But I still think if Strickland rematched Adesanya right now, I'd be picking Strickland. I think he has the recipe to beat Adesanya, and I think Strickland's actually really good. I think people get his personality and maybe some of his fighting style confused with how good of a fighter he actually is. It's no cakewalk. Let's talk about some facts here. Khamzat Chimaev does not have a single ranked win at middleweight in getting this title shot, which, by the way, is not guaranteed right now. Again, I mentioned the hand injury. Maybe Dricus steps in. I mean, if all is right in the world, Dricus is getting the next shot. Chimaev can fight the winner, whatever. But I mean, if we're going off merit, Chimaev, in my opinion, needs another fight here. He needs to fight, Paulo Costa or someone. Jared Cannonier, I know that was a fight that was rumored as well. He needs to fight someone else to get a title shot. But that's not the point of this video. The point is, we're going to live in a world right now where Chimaev does get the next title shot, and I just can't understand him being the favorite here. Sean Strickland has far more body of work in the weight class. His only other loss at middleweight, Sean Strickland, is a very close fight with Jared Cannonier, who's a legit middleweight. Like, I don't know how people think that you can just ignore all that because of the style, because they think that, like, I saw a lot of people say, oh yeah, of course Chimaev is going to finish Strickland in the first round. I don't see it that way. I really don't. I don't think, like, even overall in his career, right? He's got 2 stoppage losses. Let's go through this for a second here, right? 60% of his losses are by decision. 40% of his losses are by knockout. But he's only had 2 knockout losses. Zaleski at welterweight, which I think we can all agree, Sean Strickland cuts way too much weight. He should have never been in that weight class, and I think that contributed to him getting knocked out there. And then the Pereira fight, which, like I said, Pereira's probably knocking out most guys in that weight class. So those are not bad knockout losses to have. This isn't a situation of, like, I mean, I'm even just trying to think of a fighter right now who's got some chin issues. I mean, you could name a few, but even like an Edmund Shabazian who seems to get finished a lot. Like, this isn't the same case with Strickland. Like, I could understand if we had a champion that's been vulnerable to getting knocked out a lot. That's not really the case with Strickland. And there's no real evidence of him having like a really bad ground game either. Like, I can't recall a fight where he was close to getting submitted or anything like that. I think Strickland's well-rounded and he's tough to take out. And, you know, do I think Strickland's going to go on some long title reign in the middleweight division? I don't, but I also don't think that Chimaev, after that performance last night, is someone we can feel confident in beating Sean Strickland right now. Like, if this is the next fight and Chimaev is fighting him, I'm picking Strickland right now, and it's got nothing to do. And people call me a Chimaev hater or Usman fan and all. It's none of that. It's just I'm a big person on merit. I'm a big person on what have you done for me in that division. And while Chimaev has looked great at welterweight, we haven't really seen his body of work at middleweight. His middleweight fights, Chimaev. We'll count Usman, obviously, because that was one last night. But you look at his middleweight fights here. Reese McKee, John Phillips, Gerald Marshard, that makes you think he's going to beat Sean Strickland? I don't know, man. Like, I am a firm believer in level of opposition, and I think that's coming true, because what did I say going into the fight with Usman? I said it's going to be like the Gilbert Burns fight, and it was very much like that. It was closer than it needed to be. Again, Chimaev very dangerous, but Sean Strickland is not a guy who's known to get finished in the first round all the time, right? He's a durable guy, and he's a smart defensive fighter. That's another thing with Strickland where I think people underestimated him against Adesanya. He does not get hit that much. So it's not even a case of like Chimaev's fighting a guy that's been battered throughout his career. I don't really understand that argument as far as what people are saying as well. And the other thing is, I know people talk about, again, that loss to Zaleski, like I mentioned before, that was way back in 2018, that loss, and Strickland's had plenty of time to bulk up and fill into his frame at 185. So like Chimaev's not going to have the same advantage he had strength-wise against Usman, in my opinion. He's actually fighting a real middleweight, a guy who's filled into the weight class. Because I've seen some people say, oh, look what he did to Usman. Usman's not a middleweight. He's a welterweight. Yes, he cuts to welterweight, but I would think that Sean Strickland is the more middleweight established guy in the weight class because he's actually fought in the weight class for a while. So there we go. So yeah, I think these odds are off. I think if the odds, again, like minus 190, even that, I think this should be flipped. I think Strickland should be minus 190, Chimaev at plus 165. But, I know it's Chimaev and everyone loves him. And listen, I like Chimaev too. This is nothing against him at all. It's against the people that said he was going to steamroll Gilbert Burns and he did it. And the same people that said he was going to steamroll Kamaru Usman and he didn't. Like, we got to live in a reality where these are results that happen. They were decisions. They weren't first round finishes. So I think Chimaev has the potential to be a champion. I just don't, I think his cardio is a concern. I really do. Like, I don't think the broken hand was the reason that he slowed down in that fight. I think he legit needs to work on his cardio because Sean Strickland is a guy that has gone 5 rounds a lot of times. Sean Strickland has good cardio. He's training all the time. I've never seen a Sean Strickland fight where I thought, oh man, he's really slowing down here. It's going to be tough for him. So personally, I think Strickland can survive the first round with Chimaev and then things get interesting, right? And I think the more the fight goes on, I think Strickland can either get a late finish or he can win a decision here. But yeah, I think the odds here are nuts, and I don't think Chimaev should be the betting favorite. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know there's going to be some passionate Chimaev fans upset about what I said here, but look, this is my opinion. I'm not doing this for clicks or anything. I really don't think Chimaev has good cardio, and I think that's a big question mark if he's fighting for a title, because you're going to have a 5-round fight, and that's a crucial part. If you don't make it out of the first round, is how those rest of those rounds are going to look. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.